The next item is from Deputy Lucinda Creighton, the need to address the crisis facing residents of Longboat, Quay, Dublin 2 in relation to fire safety issues. Are you taking this, Minister? Deputy.
Corla, thank you for taking this topical issue this evening. This is a matter of grave and urgent concern to the 900 residents concerned who occupy 298 apartments in this development. I have to say I'm really annoyed and very disappointed, Corla, that the Minister is not here and has been glaringly absent over the last 48 hours since this story became prominent in the national media. There has been virtually no response from the government. I think it's really disappointing. I think, Corla, it's useful at least that we have social media to track the whereabouts of ministers these days. And I note that the Minister has been busy hoisting flags and such activity this afternoon. I really do think it's inappropriate. I think that the whole point of these topical issues was that ministers were to come and be accountable to deputies on all sides of the House. I don't blame the Minister of State, but I do think that the Minister himself should be here to take this. In the last hour, the Dublin Docklands Development Authority has made what I would regard as not just a derisory offer to the residents concerned, but also one that involves a certain degree of funny accounting, because I'm aware, having met with the residents and attended the public briefings on this, that the Dublin Docklands Authority and the receiver involved in this case on behalf of the receiver who has taken over from the developer Bernard McNamara, that they have both contributed in excess of €1 million already in this case. Now, they have essentially tried to repackage that in an act that's not unfamiliar, unfortunately, on the government benches, and have now announced a €2.75 million contribution to the costs. That, I assume, can only include the €1 million that has already been effectively paid out. And so, in reality, it is a sum of €1.7 million and not €2.75 million. And I think that needs to be clarified. We know that the Dublin Docklands Development Authority has a history of dealing with funny money and strange forms of accounting. But I really think that they must take us all for fools by trying to repackage that money in their announcement this afternoon. There are a number of points that I think are pertinent in this matter. I think, firstly, the crisis in Longboat Quay, which is not unfortunately unique. There have been similar examples. We're all familiar with Priory Hall and many others. But they point to a complete and utter absence of accountability in corporate Ireland. And this is a trend that has been exposed, I think, beyond any belief over the last 7 or 8 years. Bernard McNamara has been through a bankruptcy process, and there is no recourse to him legally. That's the legal position. And the project's architect, the individual who certified the construction as being safe, left Ireland in 2011 and now operates in Ghana. It's highly likely that the issues identified in Longboat Quay will crop up in developments across the country again, and more victims of light-touch building regulations will emerge. And I have spoken about this in this chamber and elsewhere before, but on the day of the tragedy in Berkeley during the summer, when unfortunately, because of shoddy development and irresponsible behaviour on the other side of the Atlantic, sadly, young Irish citizens lost their lives, and many of their friends were injured very seriously. On that same day, our Minister for the Environment and his junior minister were writing to Dublin City Council asking Dublin City Council to relax the building regulations in the city. I think it's scandalous, frankly, and I think that this shows just how scandalous it is as well. The response of government to incidents like Priory Hall was to introduce the new building control regulations in 2014, which require assigned certifiers, who are surveyors, architects, engineers and etc. to approve all construction projects. But this system is deeply flawed. It does not address the problem that the people of Longboat Quay are facing. Just very briefly, the independence is hugely undermined by the fact that they are frequently either the designer or the building project or an employee of the developer. They're employed by the developer. They are not independent. And we need to move, Minister, to the system that they have in the UK, where there is an independent certification and where it is controlled by the local local authority itself. It's not left to dodgy and cowboy developers and their employees to certify, often falsify, frankly, the certification for these types of buildings, because we are going to see this again and again and again.
Minister.
Thank you. I thank the Deputy for raising the matter. The issue was raised in the order of business, leaders' questions today, by Deputy Sosnovic and the Taoiseach responded to his queries in relation to the very same issue. I have been supplied with a response on behalf of Minister Kelly. He is unavailable, and I just want to say at the outset, it's not inconceivable that ministers are unavailable to take these debates in the Dáil from time to time, and the deputy, as a former minister herself, should possibly.
I'm sorry, could I interrupt you here? This was a very good introduction by the present government in topical issues, and to be quite honest with you, in recent months I've had ministers not being available, we're losing slots, and unless there's a seriousness about this issue, and whether it was raised on the order of business or not is irrelevant. The department and the minister were advised this morning, before the order of business, that this topical issue was granted. So I'd appreciate that you're giving back to the department that we don't want any of that excuses. I regard the right of a deputy to ask a topical issue here. It's been very successful, and we expect, and I expect, with respect to this House, which, remember, we all have our jobs and we all have our duties, but the first duty of a minister is this House. And the topical issue is one of the main issues for deputies, backbenchers in particular, to raise matters of grave importance. And, this should not be allowed to happen. So, with respect, if you bring it back to the department, that they're not doing us any favours by telling us that this was already raised on the order of business. This is topical issues, and everybody knows it's on a Thursday at this particular time. 4:42 to be exact.
I raised the fact that it was raised on the order of business merely to make the point that it was an issue that was a matter before the House already today, not to make any suggestion, Ceann Comhairle, and with all due respect to yourself as chairman, not to make a political point. I'm just saying that it was raised by Dublin deputies today, and just stating that for the record. I seek in no way, if you grant me a little bit of leniency and time, I absolutely agree that ministers should be present here. Okay, but there was a further charge made by the deputy in respect of the relaxing or control of building regulations, and I can't answer for that charge as it is raised here as an adjournment issue. I just can't answer for that. Okay, and it's perhaps the minister should answer that for himself, but the charge is made nonetheless. So I understand that Dublin Fire Brigade has no plans to evacuate residents from their homes and intends rather to serve an enforcement notice requiring that a schedule of works be carried out to ensure an acceptable level of fire safety provision is achieved at the development. I just want to preface my further remarks by saying that this is the script that I have been given to deliver. If there has been an issue or if some development has arisen in the last hour or so, Ceann Comhairle, I'm not aware of that.
I appreciate your position.
So the issues which have emerged in Longboat Quay are a matter for the Dublin Docklands Development Authority. I can't answer for the charges that have been made by the Deputy in respect of that authority. The receiver to the developer, residents of Longboat Quay and their management company, as well as Dublin Fire Brigade, to resolve collaboratively. The Department of the Environment, Community and Local Government understands that all parties are actively engaging to find a resolution to the situation that has arisen. While Dublin Fire Brigade has been proactively engaging with all concerned for several
several months now. It cannot wait indefinitely for matters to be resolved and has accordingly this week signalled its intention to serve an enforcement notice. I don't know if events today have overtaken that. Local authorities have extensive powers of inspection and enforcement under the Fire Safety Act of 1981, the Building Control Act 1990 and the Planning and Development Acts, all of which may be relevant in relation to fire safety arrangements in residential developments. Compliance with the statutory requirements in relation to a building is first and foremost a matter for the owners, designers and builders concerned. There is a charge made here against the architect and the designer. The Department of the Environment, Community and Local Government has no function in assessing or checking compliance or otherwise of specific works or developments, nor can the Department or Minister Kelly influence or interfere in the handling of specific cases by local authorities who are at all times independent in the use of their statutory powers. Minister Kelly has a role in ensuring that adequate arrangements are in place to avoid the recurrence of such problems elsewhere. In this regard, a number of legislative reforms have been put in place since the Longboat Quay development was built, which greatly strengthened the arrangements in place for the regulation and oversight of such developments, namely A. The statutory registration of key construction professionals under the Building Control Act 2007 means that such professionals may now be subjected to professional conduct proceedings where instances of professional misconduct or poor professional performance arise. Ultimately, this may lead to removal from the statutory register, which would affect the professional's ability to earn their livelihood. B. Building control regulations were amended to require on and from the 1st of March 2014 greater accountability in relation to compliance with building regulations in the form of statutory certification of design and construction by registered construction professionals. The Multi-Unit Development Act 2011 further requires developers to supply a certificate of compliance with fire safety from a registered construction professional in each such development. It is also worth noting that Minister Kelly, in the interest of supporting owners and residents living in developments where concerns regarding compliance with fire safety arise, recently announced a review by an independent fire safety expert to develop a framework for general application in such situations. This review will outline general advice and guidance which can be used by owners, residents and their professional advisors to ensure that an adequate level of safety is in place for persons in and about their development. This may include making provision for appropriate or enhanced fire detection and alarm measures, checking that appropriate escape routes from the premises are available, designed in accordance with current standards, and ensuring evacuation plans are rehearsed in each premises in the event of a fire incident. The review is being overseen by a steering group comprised of the Department of the Environment, Community and Environment and local authority representatives under the chair of Mr Martin Reardon, former manager of Cork County Council. The steering group will prepare its report by 31st of January 2016. Can I just conclude, Ceann Comhairle, just by saying that, and I don't want to give platitudes, political platitudes to anybody, I don't know what it is like. I can't even imagine what it's like for the residents of that of Longboat, except to say that, you know, I think there's widespread sympathy for the plight that they find themselves in at the current time.
Thank you. Deputy.
Thank you, Minister. I mean, I think the first thing to say is that sympathy will not address the fact that the outstanding €2 million amounts on average to €20,000 per apartment in that development. And nobody knows how that's going to be paid for, and nobody knows who is going to pay for it. That's the first point. That is the first point. Well, my suggestion is very clear. The receiver and the Dublin Docklands Authority, which is a state entity which this government, in its wisdom, for populist reasons, has chosen to disband. I completely oppose that, but that's a discussion for next week, I suppose. But the reality is that the Dublin Docklands Authority owns the common areas in this building. It was the partner in the PPP that developed this site. It is responsible in the absence of any legal responsibility falling on the developer, because the developer went for one-year bankruptcy in the UK and is now hiding behind the legal personality of his former company. It is the responsibility of the Minister, who is the Minister in charge of the Dublin Docklands Development Authority, to ensure that the Dublin Dockland Development Authority upholds its responsibility. It is about to be subsumed into Dublin City Council. We have the bizarre situation where the Dublin Fire Brigade who are threatening the notice of enforcement are another arm of Dublin City Council, which the DDDA is about to become. It is a farcical situation that they are absolving themselves, washing their hands, and residents have been written to by the Dublin Docklands Authority saying they have no responsibility for this development. It is untrue, it is factually untrue. The DDDA is responsible, and therefore the Minister is responsible. And I heard the Taoiseach washing her hands of this today, and I've heard the government saying, essentially, you know, it has nothing to do with us. That is untrue, it is misleading, and I guarantee you, if enough of a political furore is kicked up about this, then the government will do something about it. I think it's absolutely essential now that the government show some leadership on it, and you know, all of the working group and the investigatory group that you've talked about will have absolutely no effect for the residents here, just like the building regulations that were introduced by this government in 2014 will have no effect not only on the people in Longboat Quay, but will have no effect on any future developments either, because it is a toothless regulation. It makes no difference because it is not independently certified and allows essentially developers to govern themselves. Thank you.
I mean, the points are made. There is a suggestion then, if I interpret the Deputy correctly, that the DDDA should act in respect of the common area, if I interpret the Deputy correctly, and the entire development, and that the 2 million outstanding should be found from the DDDA, or you're saying vicariously to the Minister, so that the government effectively should pay the 2 million. I think that's essentially, if I interpret the Deputy correctly, Ceann Comhairle, that's what the Deputy is suggesting.
And Dublin City Council.
Well, just for clarity and for the record of the House, forgive me, I'm not fully across this issue, but perhaps the Deputy could clarify if that is what she is asking.
Very clear, Minister. Yeah. I have been very clear. I believe the Dublin Docklands Development Authority is responsible for this development. Yeah. It engaged in a PPP with Bernard McNamara, who is not available to deal with this or to pay for any of this. So the DDDA is responsible and ought to pay the
Grant. Thank you. Thank you.
That's fine. So that's the Deputy's position, and that would be referred to the Minister in question.